which is priority one, the first priority at this point, in this moment, around sustainability? Eva, you can start.
Oh, wow. Small one, right? So I think over the course of the last more than 15 years, where I've been trying to encourage, inspire, push, threaten, whatever, the fashion industry to step up their game, I think in the beginning I thought, if only we had awareness, if only we all knew what to do, if only we had communication so the consumer would know the difference between two T-shirts, if only we would have innovation and access to solutions, then it'll all change. And honestly, we're nowhere. And I understood some of what Carlo said. I had the translation, but I think he said some of the same. We are very challenged as an industry. We might have some few companies spearheading the movement, doing all the right things, but there's no minimum criteria for setting up a fashion business, which means that Temu, Shein, whatever they're called, can just bulldoze into the market and, of course, make a product offering that is both as desirable in design and price and moving consumers. And it feels like we as an industry cannot do it on our own. So I think, unfortunately, that we have to call on legislation. And I heard you guys talking also about the political landscape and how do we actually get to a point where we can create a level playing field, where those who do good are incentivized and helped, and those who don't get punished. So I think that the one big thing right now is really to ask for the right legislation to help us steer clear. If I could ask for one legislation only, I would heavily tax carbon. If I could ask for more also related to fashion, I would probably look at price. And I think you touched a little bit upon it as well in what Carlo was talking about. I think one of the big issues of the fashion industry is that our products have become very wasteful. You can buy way too much of it. It doesn't cost you anything. So you don't value it. And I'm not saying that every wallet can afford a Prada product or, Versace, but then they can maybe buy it recycled, on a resale platform. We can find ways to buy smarter and better product, and for companies to provide customers with a more lasting product that has more value. So I think and I know it's a very challenging conversation to discuss price. Is there a minimum for how cheap a product should be? How are we going to encounter the externalities? The invoice from the river that was never paid, the cotton plugger that didn't even have enough to feed their children. How are we going to take all of that into account if a t-shirt costs 2 or 3 euros? So I think there is a conversation there. There's also a conversation about, market drivers such as sales, with constantly discounting. Everything is always on sale. In the middle of a season, we're discounting products. And I think so we've created a really vicious cycle for ourselves. And I think we're sort of stuck in it as an industry, and we won't be able to solve it if we don't have supportive legislation.
Good point. Matteo.
Thank you, Simone. Good afternoon, and thank you for the invitation. It's an honor to be here. And I think if I had one button to expand on Eva's comment and what Carlo has said, which has been fantastic, the button I would push to ignite change at a global scale will be social justice. The water crisis is a result of social injustice. Climate change is a result of social injustice. If we don't put the supply chain, the global supply chain, in the position, psychologically and economically, to think about anything else other than survival, we can talk for years and days about the best strategies to mitigate the carbon emissions, but then you're going to go to a factory in Bangladesh and they're going to be like, how am I going to pay to transition away from coal and have renewable energy in my factories? And if it would, the moment you inject social justice into the supply chain, that's when you put everybody, ideally, optimistically, in the conditions to be able to, at every step of the supply chain, do what it takes to do the best thing that a designer can do. And that's the biggest challenge for us today. I think we talk about Imaginarium, where we talked about dreams, we talked about hope. I think the designer's role today, what designers want, is to bridge the gap between what they imagine and reality. Cini Boleri, a great designer that has been celebrated in the city of Milan this year, once said, the only way to evolve is to really bridge that gap between utopia and reality with courage. And I think that's one of the best quotes, best sentences that really resembles what creative teams and designers teams should do and actually want to do. But in order to do that, we got to put them in the position to be able to afford it. Somebody has to start investing in people if we want people to work at the max level and amplify their ability to design better systems to take us out of this crisis. That's, I think, the most important aspect. And I'm very happy that for the first time in history, we have the European Union talking about legislations that actually wants to bring social justice to the global supply chain. Easy? No. But somebody has to do it. And in front of injustices, everybody at one point will have to speak up and they will make mistakes. I made hundreds of mistakes and I continue to do it, to your point. But if the fashion industry doesn't allow itself to make these mistakes, who will? We're such a creative industry. Who can create a better system if not us? I ask you. We design habits and habitats.
Fernanda, priority number one.
Priority number one. I do believe that it's really difficult because it's an industry that the problem is huge, the overproduction. If you think the garments that are produced and the habitants that we are in the planet, when you see that numbers and the garments that are produced per year, it's really crazy. At the same time, it comes a social perspective, which is really, really important. Priority number one, from my point of view, it's transparency and accountability. Because without having the transparency, if we don't have the traceability for that data, for all that information, how could you get the brands held accountable? Or how could we, as customers, find the information and not be trapped by some green claim? If there's no information, if there's no data, you don't arrive to nothing. If you cannot measure, you cannot solve problems, environmental and social. So definitely that will be my priority.
So question number two. I want your advices for a customer, for a CEO, and for a designer. So what they have to do practically. So if I have to buy a cloth, which is the first thing that I have to always think of when I'm buying something. CEO, we have many here, or someone who's listening, what they have to do, they have a strong power, and designer. So I will start from you now, Fernanda. You had a lot of time to think about your answers, now you don't.
Okay, thank you, that's fair. I would say on the point of customer, okay, I will try to take the time to, every time that we're going to do a purchase, we do an impact, environmental or social. So try to take the time to see what is behind. Where is process? Is it makes sense that the price point also makes valuable? If it's valuable that I am buying a piece that it's 5 pieces, would it make sense that the social that is behind is protected? Try to see if it's organic. Of course, there are many. We enter in a huge topic because on the customer perspective is what you think. You're thinking on the environment, you're thinking on the planet, you're thinking on your body, because maybe if there are chemicals, if there's an organic tanning that it's chemical, of course, it hits your body. So, try to take the time. Every time that you're going to think about purchase something, think that you have the responsibility and there's an impact of what we take and be accountable. Then CEO. Invest, and we need to be part of properly of the business, not just like have your chief sustainable officer. You need to have your chief sustainable officer involved with a chief operational officer, involved with a chief fiscal officer in sustainability topics.
Otherwise, it doesn't arrive to nothing. And
Design.
This is something really important because it's for where everything takes up from the design. If you design, you start from the first step when you're going to know if an item could be recycled, could be thrown away, and it will be really difficult to separate it, if it could be upcycled. So all the things start from the eco-design.
Good points. Matteo, customer, CEO, designer.
All right, customer, you mentioned it before. I think a great tip for any customer is to think about clothing just as they think about food. It interacts with our skin. Our skin actually eats every day. So why do we care a lot about the food that we put in? We all on some crazy diets at some point in our life, right? We're all very close and meticulously looking at what we drink and what we eat, but we never think about what we wear. And that's something that has to change. If we start looking at clothing the way we look at food, I think automatically out of the tips and that you were given as children to make sure that we're putting in our body what's the best for us. And usually if it's good for us, it's good for the environment as well. Not always, but usually it is. Then we're at a very good point to start redefining our relationship with clothing. Designers, I work with a lot of designers, and the first thing I say is like, work to extend pleasure of use of your products. Carlo mentioned emotional durability. That's awesome. That is exactly what we should focus on. And this is not a quote I've said. Extending pleasure of use of the products comes from Michele De Lucchi. He once said ecology is the ability to create products that extend pleasure of use. Focus on these words. Extending pleasure of use means that the garment has to work well to enable you to love your trousers or your shirt as long as you want. And at the same time, every time you open your wardrobe, you feel good about wearing them and you feel sexy wearing it all the time. You don't want to throw it away. And you are confident that what's in your shirt and in your trousers doesn't actually alter your skin or your body. Because if you start itching or developing eczemas or dermatitis off of it, you're not going to wear them anyway. So that's a great quote, I think, for designers, a general rule. CEOs, that's a tough job. But today, after years of pure thermal research in fashion houses put at the service of pure financial profits incentives, it's time to change that around. And it's time to, in my opinion, to create company cultures where the formal research of the creative teams is always held accountable by the function of the enterprise and the products that we take, and by a choice of technology and processes that enable us to redefine and rediscover the magical triangle of fashion design: form, function, and technology. Not at the service of just profit, but at the service of the benefit and well-being of stakeholders and communities. Enterprises were built on this. Things started to change in the last decades. It's within our scope to act as CEOs and inject that culture into the company to redefine the role of enterprise and fashion houses in the 21st century.
Thank you, Matteo. Eva.
Thank you. Okay, so I agree with all of your points. So I've had to think about saying something different. I think there's one point around consumers, and that is, if we think that they will buy fashion because of sustainability, we're wrong. And I know you can find BCG and McKinsey surveys where they've asked a lot of people, does it matter to you that the product is sustainable? And everybody says yes, because of course you do. If you're asked that, of course you'll answer that. But is that what matters when you're at the counter? Hell no. It matters if it's the right product. Does it look nice? Does it fit me? Do I feel good in it? Is it the right price? It's all of those things first. Sustainability will always come down the line. So I think we're kidding ourselves if we think that consumers will be driven by that when it's about fashion. We buy fashion for emotions and a lot of other things that doesn't have to do with sustainability. You would buy an ugly carrot because you know it's organic and it's healthy for you. Would you buy an ugly jacket because it's organic? I don't think so. So I think that's one thing that it needs to get out of the way. We need to make sure that the consumer has the choice of an attractive product that gives them all of the above and sustainability. And then I think they will buy it. But I agree. The advice to the consumer, I think the one thing is just, do I need it? I think we need to all ask ourselves that question when we're buying something new. Do I really need it? And if you wake up the next day and you still want it, yeah, maybe you need it. And it's not that we shouldn't indulge and enjoy. And I think design and fashion is, it's an industry of creativity and ingenuity. And, many people here look so beautiful. I mean, there's an incredibly beautiful dress right there in the front row, and we would not want to live without it, right? And what it gives us to dress us up. So I think we need to also not take that away from our industry. And that would probably be my advice to designers. I agree they need to think about, is it made for disassembly? Can it be recycled? But they still need to also give us joy and still create things that are really beautiful and that will make us feel enlightened and inspired and give color to our world. But if they can also think about creating products that are lasting value, things that has quality, that dress probably is a quality dress. You've probably had it for ages and it will last forever, right? So that I think is a really, really good design. And then to the CEOs, could I speak to the shareholders and the boardroom instead, now that we've had 2 comments? Because I think that's where the problem is. The investors, the shareholders, and the boardrooms need to help CEOs make long-term plans. If they're driven by short-term incentives, they'll always have to try to make their mark in the next quarter, and then we're not going to get there. There's no cheap or easy way to getting to a place of sustainability for businesses or for the planet. It will be uncomfortable, it will hurt, but we can get there. But we need patient capital. We need patient shareholders and boardrooms who appreciate that their CEO is not going to deliver on the numbers in the short term, but they will in the long term. Sustainability is about resilient business models. The more you know, the traceability and transparency is important, because the more you know about your business, the better you can manage it, the better you can measure it, but you can also turn up and down. And if we're going to see more legislation coming, water is going to be more costly, land is going to be more costly, everything has to be more costly, then sustainability will be a parameter for sustainable economy as well.
Matteo, Fernanda, and Eva, I could stay here forever talking to you, but we are already over time. It was very, let's give a big applause for your visions, for your commitment, for your passion. Keep on doing what you are doing and do it long term. That's another good thing to learn about sustainability. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.
And I give the platform to the...
Long term, but do it fast.